Please welcome Yvonne Brandelli.
Hello. I'd like to start out with a free association activity. So essentially, when I say a word, I just want you to acknowledge the first word that comes to your mind. Are you ready? So the word is arthritis. So show of hands, how many people thought of aches, pains, stiffness, or some sort of word along those lines? Okay, a fair number of hands. Makes sense. Since arthritis affects about 1 in 5 Canadians, most of us have been touched by the disease in some way, and we can recognize just how painful it is, affecting our joints, and basically our day-to-day lives, being able to get out of bed and text a loved one. So pain is certainly implicated, which is good in the sense that we're here at PAINtalks this evening. But I want to table that for a second, and I want to ask, how many of you thought of a grandparent or a senior when you heard the word arthritis? Again, a good number of hands. This disease has a reputation for affecting older generations. But how many of you thought of a child or an adolescent? Okay, I think I see maybe 3 hands in the audience. So that puts me in good company. When I was first asked to work on a study in pediatric rheumatology, I was a little bit confused. Based on my limited and inaccurate knowledge, this was a disease that affected older generations. And I was shocked to learn that just over 24,000 kids across our country are living with this disease. And arthritis, both in old and young, unfortunately has no cure. Having said that, we do have treatments. We know that things like anti-inflammatories and biologic agents, paired with a healthy dose of physical activity, can make a world of a difference for these kids. It can reduce their pain and stiffness, and for some, it can even lead to period of disease inactivity, which is fantastic. But the thing about these treatments is that they're hard. They can take a toll physically as well as emotionally on the child as well as the family. So to give you context, many of these treatments or medications involve self-injections or shots administered at home by the parents. And if it's not that, it's a laundry list of uncomfortable side effects, things like nausea and abdominal pain. Even engaging in physical activity, although it's recommended, it can be a source of pain for a child with a stiff or inflamed joint. I mean, how many of us exercise regularly, let alone when we aren't feeling 100%, right? So I just want you to take a moment and think about it. So imagine yourself as that 7-year-old child with arthritis, having to receive that painful poke each week, only to feel sick afterwards. Or better yet, put yourself in the parent's shoes, to administer that painful poke to your child who is potentially crying or running away. How would that make you feel? And even though you know it's in the best interest of your child, how would you decide between the short-term pains and the long-term gains of a treatment? So these were the questions that I was asking myself when I was working in pediatric rheumatology. And in talking with parents about their everyday experiences raising a child with arthritis, I learned that this was a challenge for many. So I didn't stumble upon this quote until later on, but when I did see it, I thought it really captured the essence and the paradox of what so many parents were describing. So this was a quote from a mother of a child, and she said, "While my daughter was able to put on a brave face at the hospital when receiving needles, she was unable to control her upset when receiving her injections at home. Her dad and I weren't prepared to hold her down or restrain her, and getting her to calm down enough to safely receive a needle proved to be agonizing. Tears, both hers, her sister's, and ours, were inevitably shed, and sometimes it would take 2 hours to finally get the shot into her. And afterwards, I would feel horrible. And it was even harder her vomit so much that we had to take her to the hospital." So these images and these questions, they're what inspired me to move across the country and pursue a program of research at the intersection of pediatric rheumatology and pediatric pain, all through the lens of a psychologist in training. So we know that rates of adherence to these medications in this population is less than ideal. It ranges between 40 and 70%. So I set out to explore whether treatment pains were related to this. Or more specifically, a parent's fears of their child's pain was related to this. So if we have a parent who fears their child's pain to the extent that their own heart is racing, and they're worried it's going to be the worst experience yet, they may begin to avoid certain activities that causes their child's pain, such as some of these treatments. So to do this, I partnered with Cassie and Friends. Now, this is a parent organization based out of British Columbia, but really known across the country for their advocacy and education around childhood arthritis. And together we set out to recruit parents of children with arthritis from around the world to complete an online survey. And based on results from over 300 families, we found parents who reported having more fears of their child's pain also reported a greater difficulty to follow through with their child's treatment plans regularly. And this makes good sense. No parent wants to see their child in pain, and frankly, it's something that most of us want to avoid. But the thing is, we know that the benefits of these treatments far outweigh the risks or the short-term treatment pains. And we can say this because just half a century ago, childhood arthritis was recognized, let alone treated. And kids who had arthritis grew up to live lives full of pain and disability by way of joint deformity and damage. Some researchers even felt that these children actually led shorter lives prior to the advent of these modern medications, I should say. And when we look at current research, we know that parents who report following treatment plans more regularly have children who report less disease-related pain, and a better ability to just be involved in daily life, such as hanging out with their friends and going to school, which is so important. So there's absolutely no question that it is incredibly difficult to see a child in pain, but we know that the benefits of these treatments far outweigh the risks or the potential lifelong suffering associated with undertreated arthritis. The other thing I want you guys to think about, though, is how a parent's fears and reactions to a treatment can ultimately affect the child. So there was one study done in adults with needle phobias, and in their sample, 80% reported having a first-degree relative with the exact same phobia. So that suggests that in some way, these fears are passed down through the generations. And we know that one way this happens is learning through observation. So if we look at this photo here, we see a parent with a facial expression of fear and just a general demeanor of worry about this treatment. They are going to ultimately learn this same behavior and develop these similar fears and phobias that they can take with them, or they will take with them into their adult lives. So yes, I think by now I've made it very clear that parents play a huge role when it comes to their child's treatment adherence. But they also play a huge role when it comes to their child's long-term outcomes when it comes to arthritis. But by now, I'm guessing that you're asking yourself, or saying to yourself rather, okay, she makes good sense, but I don't have a child with arthritis. This does not apply to me. And that's fair. But I do challenge you to ask yourself whether there's ever been a time in your own life where you've also had to weigh the short-term pains versus the long-term gains of a treatment. Say you are a parent. If you've ever had a child with a cold and they're fussing and they don't want to take their medications. Or say you take them to get their 2-year vaccinations when historically these haven't gone so well. Or if you don't have a child, even just signing yourself up for the annual flu shot. We're getting to be about halfway through flu season, so if you haven't received your injection yet, I challenge you to ask yourself, what's been holding you back? Sometimes our fears and our worries can get in the way of what's best. So it's really important that we help parents learn to cope with their fears and provide them with pain management strategies so that they can help their children get through these treatments. And the thing is, we have all this information. Research has given us many evidence-based pain management strategies like distraction and bubbles and humor, all these things. And psychological therapies can help both parents and children cope. And my research going forward will explore ways that we can share this information more widely. But ultimately, until the day a cure is found, or at least until these treatments become easier to receive, In order for children, both with and without arthritis, to benefit from modern-day medicine, it's important that we as parents learn to help ourselves too. Thank you.